Hi, my name is Laurence. I've been baking sourdough for the last 4 years on and off at home and in professional kitchen. Right now, I have a small operation called Perdu where I bake at from home about 6 loaf a day, some bagels, and in the meantime, because my job is closed due to COVID. And today we're gonna make a classic country loaf with spelt flour of sourdough. So what you will need is a timer. You don't have to use a timer, you can use your phone or your oven, but it's important to keep track of time. Thermometer is also not mandatory, but useful for taking temperature of your water and your dough. So it's good. You can also use your finger, just try to feel to get the right temperature, a little bit above room temperature. This is pretty useful. You can also just use a blade, but this is a razor blade to score the bread. If you don't have, you can use just a razor blade that you can find pretty easily, I think. And then you're gonna need spatula. I mean, it doesn't matter, you can have just one. And a dough scraper is pretty useful and pretty cheap, but if you don't have, you can go with the spatula in your hands. And then for ingredient, you want to have hopefully organic flour, bread flour with a higher protein content for gluten, and some sort of whole wheat flour, so whole grain. It could be spelt, whole wheat, or any other whole grain flour, and then sea salt, couple bowls, and water. Alright, so now the most important part of sourdough making is the levain. So if your levain is not healthy, your bread's not gonna work. You can ask for a friend for a tablespoon or their active levain, or you can make your own. If you make your own, this is the tartine method where imagine this is empty, so you put about this much water in it, a handful of flour until it's a doughy consistency, put a towel on top, and then keep it in a shaded area, not too hot, for 2 to 3 days until it starts having little bubbles and extending a little bit. There might be black on top, that's normal, you scrape it out. And then once you see the bubble, it's going to be ready for feeding. So every 24 hours, you discard 80% of the levain, and then you feed it equal part water flour. So it could be 100-gram flour to 100-gram water with the 20% remaining, and you mix that every 24 hours until your levain is consistently raising and falling, and it should at least double in size. As you can see, it's over double in size now. So it can actually, I've seen it triple in size too. So, but double is good. So today I have a levain recipe for you when your levain is ready. So I fed this levain last night, 12 hours prior. I didn't keep it somewhere too warm, because if it's too warm, it's gonna go through its life cycle faster, and 12 hours is a long time, but you could do between 8 and 12 hours. And this recipe was 21 gram of levain, 105 gram of water, and 105 gram of flour. And now we're gonna do 2 loaves of country loaf. That's gonna weigh about 880 gram, but it doesn't really matter. You just cut it in half when it's ready. Okay, so we're gonna start step by step. First is the Autolyse, which is it gives strength to the flour. You mix your flour together, and then you add the water to it, so the flour absorbs the water more easily than if the salt was in, because the salt actually dries things. So that's kind of the principle. But if you do a short autolyse, it's okay to add the Levain at the same time. We're only doing a 20-minute autolyse today just to help, but we don't need to do really a longer one. You can if you want. If you want to do a longer autolyse, I would suggest not putting the Levain in, but since we're beginner here, it's just easier to mix the Levain in at that steps. So I already weighed my flour. Here I have my 720 grams of bread flour. I just get the Nutra Baked from Tug. I really like it. And only option at the grocery is that organic spelt flour. That's really tiny bags, but it's good. So I'm gonna mix this in, and I just want to make sure it's mixed in before I add the water in the Levain. And the spelt flour was 180 grams. So, and I like to have a container with my water already. I felt it with, well, I mean, I took the temperature, and it's 24 degree or 70, 74, 75 Fahrenheit. But if you don't have this, you can just feel it. It's like room temperature, maybe a little bit warmer, but lukewarm maybe. And but you don't want it too hot or too cold, because ideally your bread at the end should be 25 degrees Celsius. Your dough, your final dough, before you shape it. So you don't want to have like a 30-degree water, because then your fermentation is gonna go a little crazy. Okay, so now I'm gonna add the water. We're doing a wet dough, but we're going easy on ourselves. We're doing 72%, if that means something to you, because it's really humid here in Tofino, so you don't necessarily need to go 80%, especially if you're a beginner. So this is 648 grams of water. And you try to be as precise as possible, because you know you might spill a little bit and here and there, or like some stick on your hand, so it's never 100% precise. But if you try to be as precise with your scale, then you have more chance on your side to have a good result. And talking about being precise, as a go, you're gonna have more intuition, but for the first few time, I would recommend following the recipe. Follow recipe and feel like how the recipe go, and then after you do it a few times, you're gonna be able to notice if something off or not, and really go with your intuition. But for the first few times, I would really recommend just trusting the recipe. Okay, so now we have flour, and I'm gonna add the Levain actually this time. So we're doing Levain 180 grams. So you want to make sure there's at least that, I mean, I measured it like that, but if you have, you know, if you had some left in your bowl when you mix it and anything, you just always want to make sure you have a tablespoon left for your feeding for your next Levain. Even if you're off like a 5 gram, is that a huge deal? That's more important, but we're good right now. So mix it in. Okay, so it's gonna start getting kind of difficult to mix in with the spatula, so you're gonna have to go in with your hands and get a little bit messy. I like to use a dough scraper You really want to keep everything in the bowl. So I like to wet my hand a little bit, not a lot, because obviously it would affect, just to say, so it sticks a little less. Then I just grab from underneath, bring the flour in the middle, and mix a little bit. This is just to incorporate everything. You don't want to over mix at this point. You just want to have everything combined. And 2 loaves is pretty easy to mix by hand, so you should have no issue. So this is really my best friend when I'm making. It's kind of gross, but and as you can see, like, everything's mixed in. It's like, and now it's gonna hydrate and it's gonna start getting strength, because you can see like it's just falling apart. Time is set. Is my lid. Put it on. Nope. I'll move this aside for now. And now we're gonna talk about starter. So the sourdough starter is a wild fermentation versus the starter, which is manufactured and is actually one string of the wild starter that is taken and made in the lab. So it's not as complete as the starter. It doesn't have the same nutritional value as a wild sourdough starter, and doesn't have the same effect on your flour and your dough. So it's not as nutritious and as flavorful as this classic sourdough starter. So I think that's why people are going crazy with sourdough, because it's just more flavorful, more nutritious. It shouldn't really bug your stomach like a store-bought yeast can. So right now we used most of it. We have enough to feed it. So we're gonna feed it equal part water and flour, like we would. If we had it on the counter, you would feed it every day, discard 80%, then keep 20% and feed it 100 flour, 100 water, with your half and half white and whole wheat flour. And if you didn't want to do that every day because you don't want to do bread that often, you can keep it in your fridge and then feed it every week. And then when you want to do bread, maybe plan a couple days ahead and keep it on your counter and make it strong again by feeding it every 24 hours. But I'm doing bread really often, so I'm just gonna feed it like I would. I actually feed mine twice a day, but it's just because I'm doing it every day. So I do a small feeding right now, and then I'll do a bigger feeding at night. Alright, so I like to start with the water actually for feeding the levain, because you can mix it in and then it's going to be really even with the flour. So I'm going to do 100 gram. And what I didn't mention is, if you don't feed your starter, it's gonna start to be starved, like be hungry. Like after it goes through its life cycle of rising and decreasing, is because it has nothing left to eat. So that's how it's gonna die after a few days of not feeding. You can usually bring it back after a few days, but if you do it for a long period of time, it's just not going to be healthy. Did 100 gram of water, now I'm doing 100 gram of flour. You can do smaller quantity, maybe we can link it. I can give a mathematic equation where you can find smaller quantity, you can find your own quantity, so that you don't have to waste 100 and 100. But if you don't want to like the headache of doing the math, you can just wanted that simple recipe. But maybe we'll make it's a simple equation where Levain is X, water is Z, and flour is Y, and then you can do 1 to 5 to 5 or 1 to 10 to 10, whatever you want. But anyway, we'll link some information about that. Mix, and there you go. It's almost been 20 minutes for our Autolyse. So now we're gonna weigh our sea salt, which is 18 grams of sea salt. Oops, too much. There you go. Just gonna wait, I think 1 minute left. 18 grams of sea salt. Get it ready. It's almost there, So it looks like this. The texture changed a little bit, you see. Oh, there you go. So the texture changed already. You can see there's a little bit more strength. We're gonna build more strength as it go, but I don't know if you remember, but before I wouldn't be able to do that. Okay. So just add it on, make sure everything goes in. And now I would say this is the part where I mix the most truly. So usually, bakers, they use a mixer at that point, and they can mix up to 8 minutes with the machine. So, I mean, you don't want to go too crazy because we're going to build as it go with the fold. But this is your chance to give it a little bit of a mix and to really incorporate the salt nicely, because if it's not incorporated nicely, it's gonna give it uneven dough, since the salt is gonna dehydrate some parts. But it's a pretty small dough, too low, so it goes pretty fast. I'd say that's pretty good. Lift it up in one bowl. It's pretty good. I like to scrape the bowl so that I'm sure that all the ingredients are actually in it. That's not mandatory. Then, there you go. Now we're gonna wait. We're gonna do a stretch and fold for an hour and a half. So we're gonna do 3 times stretch and fold every half an hour. So I'm gonna put my timer for 30 minutes. And then I'll come back and show you the stretch and fold that we're gonna do. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes and now the dough has relaxed. Before it was a ball, now you can see it just kind of relaxed and spread. Now we're gonna do stretch and fold. You can do up to 8. So you're gonna take a little corner of your dough, stretch it until it's almost tearing, but you don't want it to tear, and then put it towards the center. Then you take the next corner, stretch it, then put it in the middle, pull, and then just do this until you went all around it. And you can wet your hands a little bit for that if if you find it's too sticky. There you go. And now you're just gonna leave it to rest. Just make sure everything kind of sticks together so that it actually does it thing, like it's a new ball again. I'm gonna put the lid on and put a 30-minute timer, and that's it until the next stretch and fold. It's been 30 minutes to our first fold, and now we're done. We're gonna do a second fold. So you can do a little bit less than 8 if you feel like your dough is getting tense. Same principle though. You stretch until it's almost tearing, and you push it to the center. Stretch, pull. kind of hard with this angle. And there you have it. So it's gonna go for another 30 minutes, and we're gonna go back and do it one more time. So 30 minutes passed. I just did the third fold, pull and fold, stretch and fold, and now we're gonna go into bulk fermentation for 2 to 3 hours, depending on the weather or how warm it is in your house. And I'm gonna put a 1 hour timer and then check if I need to do a little coil fold where I can show you what it is. And I do that usually 1 every hour for two times, and then after that will be pre-shaping. So it's been an hour now. Our dough is rested. It got it relaxed, and to create more tension, I like to do a coil fold, which is a gentle, very gentle fold. So my hands are a little bit damp. I'm making sure my dough is not sticking to the bowl, and I'm just gonna go from the middle, pull, and fold it underneath itself. I'm gonna do that 4 times on each side, like that, and it's just gonna create a little bit more strength without destroying the bubbles that's being formed. And there we go. And now I'm gonna do that maybe 1 more time, and then let it rest for an hour before shaping. So 1 hour, another coil fold, and then another hour, and then if my dough double the size, I'll be ready for shaping. If not, I'll wait until it's double the size. Okay, so now we're 3 hours later, total bulk rise. The bread has double the size. You can see it's more bubbly. It's nice to have a glass container because you can see some bubble formed a little bit around. And so it's ready for pre-shape. For beginner, I would definitely use a little bit of flour to help with the stickiness. So you can start with putting a little flour on the top of the dough, and then you have your spatula or dough scraper close by, and then you just flip it on the table and use the scraper to help. So here's our dough facing down. This side you can just help yourself, especially the first time. So now we have 2 loaves there, so we're gonna cut it in half. Usually metal would be ideal, or even you could use your bread knife to do that, but I forgot mine right now, so I'm just gonna use this. And you could weigh these dough, but because it's just 2, it's kind of easy to eyeball it. You just cut it in half. So pre-shape, you wanna, right now we have our banneton, but you could use bowls and a towel to line it with so it doesn't stick. Then you flour this, but these are round, so we're gonna go for round shape, and that's probably, I mean, that's pretty straightforward shape. So first you take the corner, you bring it in, all the corners in, want to help it being round. Then you can flip it over, and now you can use your dough scraper to help, and you're just gonna try to make a tight ball. I like to do it with my hands, but most people I've seen do it with the dough scraper. And you just kind of pull it underneath itself a little bit and make a bouncy ball. Go. I'll put a little flour underneath so it doesn't stick. And now that's the pre-shape. I'm gonna leave it like this for 20 minutes, then do the last final shaping. So do it once again, fold the corner in, make it long. I think this one's gonna be a little bit bigger, but it's really not a big deal. Put it over. Until it's a nice little bouncy ball. Tap it. It actually has a purpose. It's to equalize the bubbles in the bread. You can see like they're already coming out. It's a good sign. And actually we can cover it for 20 minutes. And 20 minutes later we'll do the last final shape. Okay, so the dough has rested for 20 more minutes, and now we're ready for the final shape. As you can see, it's less bouncy, it relaxed again. So we're gonna scoop it, and then just be aware of which side is which. So side up is gonna go upside down, and now you can spread it out a little bit. Okay, so just make it a little bit more square kind of thing. And now we're taking the bottom, flipping it, and bringing it halfway, pushing it. Now we're taking the side towards the bottom, pulling, bring it in and in. Now we're taking the top, pull it, and bring it halfway. And now you take the little ears, bring it in, and then we're almost done. We're just gonna take this part and flip it over. So, and now we're just gonna make it more circular. So I'm doing the same technique where you can use this, most people do. Just go a little bit underneath and bring it and turn it on itself. I'm used to doing it with my hands. I'm just kind of bringing it in as I turn it, and that way I can feel how the tension is building, because you don't want to go over its capacity because it's gonna tear, and you don't want it to tear, it's gonna lose its strength. So I'd say I would go like that. I leave it on the table for at least 30 seconds, 1 minute, so that underneath is gonna seal. You can put a little flour on it so it doesn't stick to the rag. And now we're gonna flip it so this side is gonna go upside down. And that's okay. If you see if it's kind of like really spreading open, you can always pinch it together, but that's normal, that's fine. And now I'm gonna put the towel over, but you don't want to do it too tight because it might affect the shape. That's one. Same thing, flip it over, make it a little bit more square. Take the bottom, pull, bring it to the middle, push a little bit, take the sides, pull, and fold it over itself. Take the top, bring it to the middle, take the ears, bring it to the center, and now you take the top one last time, flip it on itself. Now at this point you don't really want the flour because you want it to stick on the table. You can always spray to your table if it doesn't stick. And now I'm just gonna, like, it's not really sticking, so I'm gonna use this spray bottle and spray it over the table so it sticks better. You could also use this. Until it's nice little round and it's just some tension. egg, put the flour. At that point you want kind of a good quantity of flour because you don't really want it to stick on the towel, which might happen if you don't put enough. And that's it for shaping. Now we're gonna wait. You could retard this, put it in the fridge overnight and bake it in the morning, but for this video we're gonna let it rest at room temperature for 2 hours minimum. You could do 2 to 4 hours. The flavor is gonna change. At 2 hours it's mostly gonna be a mild sour taste, but the more you go, the more sour that your dough is going to be, and maybe it's gonna affect the rising as well. It could be overproof after 3 or 4 hours, but if you're more advanced, you would know when to bake it. But I'd say 2 hours is safe for that. So the bread has rised in this basket for 2 hours, and you can tell by its texture it's a little bit puffier. It maybe rise from not double, but a little bit more. And so our Dutch oven is in the oven for at least half an hour. We preheated the oven. I do 450. So we're gonna do 450 with the lid of the Dutch oven on for 20 minutes, and then 450 still for another 20 minutes without the lid. So let's do that. I'll show you. I get my pot out and ready to go before I score the bread, because the bread, once it's scored, it's gonna open up a little bit, and maybe it will be harder to handle after it's sat with the cut in. So we're gonna get our pot ready. It's really hot, so just be mindful. Put the flour on a little bit. That's just preference. You got the blade. You want to go in the 90-degree angle, is it? Anyway, I just follow the natural curve of my hand, and I follow the natural curve of the loaf. And I would go in a little bit. You want the as deep as the blade, have the blade go. Okay, put that. I don't know how I'm gonna lift it. Okay, it wasn't working with just that tiny piece, because as you see, I already expanded quite a bit, so I just slide it on a bigger piece. So I'm taking it carefully, putting it in, and that's just my little trick. But because you want as much humidity as possible in there, I just spray the little lid a little bit. Then I close. And we're gonna go in the oven for 20 minutes with the lids on, and then 20 minutes with the lids off. There you go. And it's out of the oven. So I'm pretty happy with this loaf. It's got a nice ear, and you can see it expanded. And it's a nice shape, round shape. So we're gonna cut into it and see what the crumbs looks like. Just got this knife. Bread knife is ideal, but you can do with what you have. You can leave it longer for a darker color if you want. Just make sure you let it rest before cutting into it for at least half an hour. I'd say an hour is ideal. We didn't do that, but we've been at it all day, so we're just gonna. Oh yeah, that's gorgeous. I'm happy about this, I have to say.